We start today's case in Bali, a place that people associate with tranquility and escape. Warm evenings, white sandy beaches stretching into a clear, glistening water, 5-star resorts and a culture built around hospitality and beauty. Bali is sold as a sanctuary, somewhere people go to heal, reconnect and leave their problems behind. But beneath the postcard image is a simple truth. Geography doesn't erase conflict, and distance does not protect you from the people closest to you. In August of 2014, in the middle of one of Bali's most exclusive resorts, a family trip would end in a crime so disturbing it would follow everyone involved across oceans, courtrooms, and nearly a decade of legal battles. On the morning of August 12, 2014, a taxi driver was waiting outside the St. Regis Bali resort for a young couple to return to his car. They had left their suitcase with him and gone back into the hotel, saying they would return shortly. But it had now been over an hour, so he impatiently got out of the car and went to their case. He'd missed an hour of work and needed to carry on driving. But when he opened the trunk, he flinched and stumbled backwards. Blood was seeping out of the sides of the case. He drove to the police station and dropped it there. Inside was the badly beaten body of a woman in her 50s or 60s. She had been repeatedly struck with a blunt object over the head, her blonde hair matted with blood. There were bruises and defensive wounds all over her arms, and some of her fingers were broken. The blows themselves didn't kill her. Instead, the injuries to her face caused her airway to become blocked, and she'd suffocated. Through luggage tags and talking with local hotels, they quickly learned who the woman was. Their leads took them to the St. Regis Bali resort, where Sheila von Wiese-Mack had been staying with her teenage daughter Heather. They had flown out on August 2nd and checked into the resort on August 9th, only 3 days before the suitcase was found. Reception told the police that the teen had checked out abruptly and had not reported her mother as missing. They also said that Sheila and Heather had had a lot of rows since they arrived, often loudly in public parts of the resort. Authorities traced hotel bookings and passport information. It didn't seem that Heather had gone to the airport, as her passport had been locked away for safekeeping by Sheila, but they needed to find her, and fast. Sheila von Wiese-Mack was a wealthy, well-known socialite from Oak Park, just outside Chicago. Her close friend Elliot said Sheila loved old wine, old books, and old friends. She was warm and friendly, a big traveller, and always ready to host a party. Elliot said her whole life was about bringing people together and making everyone feel warm and welcome. Her home was your home. Sheila had been married to famous jazz and classical composer James Mack. He had worked on over 60 jazz albums and was always in demand. They lived a beautiful and blessed life, moving in an elite crowd and always at high society events and functions. And when their only child Heather arrived, everything felt complete. Sheila's sister Debbie said, "Of course they doted on her, my sister's first and only child. She felt so blessed and lucky, and it was a really wonderful family." Every wall was covered in photos of Heather, and she was the apple of their eye. Heather, by her own account, was a daddy's girl, and she and James shared a passion for the arts, with Heather loving music, theatre, and ballet. But everything would change in 2006, when James suddenly fell ill on a cruise and had to be treated for a serious infection that had spread to his spinal cord. From this point on, he had to rely on a wheelchair, and a few years later, the now 76-year-old was diagnosed with colon cancer. The family took a trip to Greece for some respite, but it was here that everything would take a final and tragic turn. As Sheila was out, James was alone in the room with Heather when he suddenly stopped breathing. He had a blood clot in his lung and died almost immediately. It was now just 10-year-old Heather and Sheila. And although grief can manifest in different ways, Heather was soon acting out in ways that Sheila just couldn't navigate. Heather blamed Sheila for her father's death, saying it was her idea to take the trip and that her dad had never wanted to go. As Heather hit middle school, she was more defiant than ever, and the mother-daughter relationship was strained almost every day. It didn't matter how Sheila tried to parent or the approaches she took, nothing worked. Heather was constantly pulling away, rejecting authority, and hating any attempt at boundaries. Before long, the teen was skipping school, stealing Sheila's car, stealing her money, and hanging out with older and rougher crowds. She dropped out of school, got pregnant at least twice, and would find herself spending nights in cells for underage drinking. Sources say Heather had an explosive temper, and police records showed 86 incidents where police were called to the house. Sheila's sister Debbie said the attacks were awful. Heather would bite, hit, and shove, once pushing her so hard, Sheila fell and broke her arm. But whenever Sheila was asked if she wanted to press charges, she said no. She had lost her husband and she couldn't bear to lose her daughter too. Heather's version is that the relationship between she and her dad drove her mother mad. She was jealous of how close they were. She called Sheila an alcoholic and a drug addict with multiple personality disorder, something which has never been corroborated by those who knew Sheila. In one defeated email to a friend, Sheila wrote, "Heather was violent today and left. Very scary for me, and I am always worried about her. I realise even more after the appointment today with the psych facility that she is disturbed and very, very sick. When you live the way that I have lived with Heather for so many years, the problems become your almost new normal way of life. The intake team told me that they wanted to put her in a psych hospital then and there, but she would not have complied." She signed off by saying, "I am really scared of what she may do next." At one of the many parties she attended, the now 18-year-old Heather would cross paths with an aspiring rapper, 21-year-old Tommy Schaefer, and they were inseparable from that point on. Sheila was not at all happy. Tommy's bad influence on her already difficult teen was not what she needed. She didn't like Tommy's attitude one bit, and he openly hated her. Just before James had passed, he had changed his will, leaving a huge amount to Heather, $11 million in assets and $1.5 million in a trust. The assets would only be hers, though, if Sheila was no longer around. So in Heather and Tommy's eyes, there was only one person standing in the way of them being together, living their lives, and getting the money. Conversations between Tommy and Heather were disturbing and violent. They would call each other Bonnie and Clyde. Never one to give up, Sheila continued to provide love, financial support, and amazing opportunities for her daughter. Beautiful trips, clothes, cars. Heather wanted for nothing. Which brings us back to where this episode started, the island of Bali. Sheila had decided to take Heather away as a chance to regroup and spend some quality time together. Bali was the perfect choice. A 10-night, 5-star stay in a stunning part of the world. On the 2nd of August, the pair flew out business class, and photos of them on the plane showed a smiling and happy pair. More photos from Bali were much the same. They looked happy together, arms round each other, enjoying dinners and excursions. Going off the photos, you would never in a million years be able to tell that anything was wrong. But hotel employees and other guests saw a lot of escalating tension, arguments in public and shouting in the rooms. And little did Sheila know, Tommy was on a flight out to meet Heather. Sheila was now in grave danger. A day after Sheila's body was found, 18-year-old Heather Mack and 21-year-old Tommy Schaefer were tracked down at a nearby motel. They had checked in using their real names and Sheila's credit card, so it had only taken a few hours to find them. Just before 8 a.m, a police officer posing as a housekeeper banged on the door of room 1701, and when a hungover and sleepy Tommy answered, they stormed in, placing the pair in cuffs. The couple told investigators that Sheila had been killed by masked robbers, but they, amazingly, had managed to get away. But in a packed 5-star resort, accessed by keycards with great security and cameras, it took no time to prove this was not true.
A 19-year-old woman and her 21-year-old boyfriend have been arrested after police discovered the body of the woman's mother stuffed inside a suitcase on the resort island of Bali. The victim has been identified as 62-year-old Sheila von Wiese-Mack of Chicago, and police have taken her daughter, Heather Mack, and her daughter's boyfriend, Tommy Schaefer, into custody. Authorities say the suitcase was discovered Tuesday inside the trunk of this taxi, which was parked in front of a resort hotel on the island. Investigators say all three had been staying at the same hotel.
Both were charged in connection with Sheila's death. And piecing the timeline together, here's what they worked out had happened. Messages recovered during the investigation showed that violent ideas about Sheila had surfaced well before the trip. In a message to his cousin 6 months before the murder, Tommy said, "So that bitch Heather is crazy. She asked me to do something really crazy. She asked me to find someone to kill her mom for 50k. Just days before the trip, he made comments about drowning her and smothering her with a pillow. On August 8th, while in Bali, Sheila emailed her friend Elliot at 10:30 p.m. She wrote, "I've been waiting for the car to pick us up. Heather ran off a few hours ago and she cannot be located. I discovered she visited the clinic here and fraudulently signed my name and room number for prescription painkillers 4 days ago. She secured quite a supply, it seems. I am more frightened than ever." The next day, after a tumultuous 9 nights in Bali, Tommy would be at the resort, having taken a $12,000 flight over. He also checked himself into an expensive room a few floors above them, all paid for on a credit card that Heather had stolen from Sheila. Tommy had spent his long flight drinking heavily in business class. He got to the resort and messaged Heather. Over the next few hours, they met up on the beach and carried on texting back and forth. Tommy continued drinking, draining the hotel minibars. It was now the early hours of the morning, just before 2 a.m. Sheila had been in her room, but the young couple was still walking around the hotel. They briefly parted ways before meeting back up at 3:15 a.m. After this, Sheila came outside looking for Heather. She hurried down to reception, and it was clear from how animated she was that she was in a real panic. She then walked right into Heather in the lobby and pulled her by the arm back towards the room. Inside the room, texts between Tommy and Heather continued as they tried to iron out some sort of plan. Both egged each other on and spoke about how rich they would be when they got the money. It appeared the plan initially was for Heather to take charge in the killing, not Tommy. Tommy said, "Try your best. Can you whack her in the head with a big-ass pole?" Heather said she can make it look like her mom was drunk and fell. She typed, "I also know what is in my control. I know what makes people tick. The witch. I know what makes her tick. I'm with her so much. I know her habits. How she acts. What she does at certain times. It's like breaking out of jail. It takes several years of watching. I've been watching her routine, and I know what I do control. I'm sneaky. I'm smart. And I watch. Trust Bonnie. Don't make everyone else's mistake and underestimate me." Tommy found a heavy fruit bowl made of glass with a metal handle. He told her to find hers in the room and hit her with it, but she said she couldn't do it alone. He needed to come to the room. Tommy shoved the bowl under his shirt and came downstairs. As Sheila lay in bed slowly drifting off, Tommy snuck in. Heather had covered Sheila's mouth as Tommy struck her in the head 12 times. The couple then wrapped her in the bedsheet and crushed her body into the small suitcase, with Heather sitting on it to force it shut. An hour later, the pair were down at reception wheeling the case, and as the taxi driver sat outside the resort waiting for a fare, Heather and Tommy would see their chance to try and get away with everything. CCTV showed them putting the case into the car and then walking off. Another complexity in an already difficult case came when authorities learned something new. Heather was actually pregnant with Tommy's baby. The case went to trial in Indonesia, but it was a media frenzy all over the world. Heather, now several months into her pregnancy, sat near an emotional Tommy as court proceedings got underway. If found guilty, they could be facing a firing squad. Indonesia does not use juries. Verdicts are decided by a panel of judges. And the judges focused largely on the couple's actions after the murder and how Heather and Tommy worked together to conceal the crime. There was no clear evidence that Heather and Tommy boarded planes with this specific murder plan in mind, although as we know, many messages before this could well argue otherwise. The courts rejected the idea that this was a sudden or uncontrollable act, or an act of self-defense. Tommy's arrival changed the balance of power, and once the violence in the room started, the decisions that followed were deliberate. Tommy openly admitted that he killed Sheila, though he sometimes framed it as self-defense. Heather's position was more complicated. At times she admitted to her involvement and at other points denied it, but she did not formally plead guilty. She had let the story of the masked robbers go though, saying now that she hid in the bathroom whilst Tommy attacked her mom. Tommy wanted the money, she was scared of him, so she helped him to conceal it all. The trial briefly paused when Heather gave birth to a daughter, Stella. The pair did avoid a death sentence.
They thought he was gonna run!
But they were found guilty.
On the resort island of Bali, an Indonesian court found an American couple guilty in the premeditated murder of the woman's mother. The pair from Chicago were sentenced to lengthy prison terms.
Tommy was convicted of premeditated murder, and Heather was convicted of assisting in the murder. Heather was sentenced to 10 years, and Tommy got 18 years. Heather was sent to Kerobokan prison, a place with a notorious reputation.
Jalan in the jail. I want to go to the beach today. Let's go to the beach.
Inside, she had access to social media and often uploaded videos of herself, smoking, dancing, partying, eating McDonald's. It was hard to believe she was in prison.
You're losing your hair. No, of course not.
You want to drink Stella?
Stella's losing her hair, seriously.
Why?
Maybe it's the food. Maybe it's the Coke. All the Indonesians think I'm crazy for drinking Coke. Maybe they're onto something. Coca-Cola. She's already out of jail. That's going to be all over the news. Now I'm never going to get out of jail. Boy, that's not even news. Oh, what case are you guys here for?
Stella would stay with Heather in prison for the next 2 years and frequently appeared in Heather's videos. She took any opportunity to talk to the media. And during an interview with one reporter, Heather had a new story. She said that her mother had turned on her after learning she was pregnant. She said that Sheila had started running around the room screaming, looking for a knife. Heather called for Tommy to come and help, and once in the room, Sheila apparently grabbed his neck and started choking him. Tommy, in self-defense, just started hitting her with the bowl. As Sheila lay dead, Heather said she was hugging her and refused to leave. Tommy asked her what they should do next, and she said that they needed to put her in the case and take her with them. She didn't want to leave her mom alone. I have no idea where Heather Mack was in that moment, she said. She said even though she and Tommy spoke about killing her, she never thought it would happen. People that knew Sheila said that the idea she grabbed a knife, threatened to kill Heather and attack Tommy was just ridiculous. And Sheila's siblings said that Sheila knew Heather was pregnant before they even flew to Bali. Heather then did another interview where she said that she had been the one to kill her mom, and she had ordered Tommy to help her clean up.
I don't regret killing my mother, and as evil as that may sound, that's my reality. In my heart, in my mind, my soul, in my blood, in the oxygen running through my body, that I wanted to kill my mother. When I was 10, my mother killed my father in a hotel in Athens, Greece.
We spoke to family friend Elliot Jacobson, who says Heather's claims are nonsense.
It's the kind of statement that doesn't even warrant a response. It's such an absurdity.
He showed me this death certificate for Heather's father, James Mack. It gives the cause of death as pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in the lungs.
Why do you think she's lying about this?
Heather was never easy to figure out. I just think she's unhinged. I also think in this video that she's under some kind of opiate, heroin or cocaine.
I regret trapping an innocent person into this because it was my battle, it's my mother, it was my father.
Tommy, on the other hand, has apparently shown nothing but remorse and guilt since being in prison. He has admitted to his part and has said if he could take it all back, he would. He even turned down his parole, saying he needs to serve every single year he was given. He maintains Heather was the master manipulator, and without her, he wouldn't be where he was. Tommy's mother petitioned a Chicago court to be named as Stella's legal guardian. Whereas Tommy wanted Stella to be with his mom, Heather wanted her to be close to her in prison. And as both of them couldn't agree, the judge had no choice but to deny Tommy's mom. Stella would have to remain in prison with Heather until she was 2, and then she would be moved to the foster care system in Bali. In 2016, Robert Bibbs, Tommy's cousin, who was texting him about Sheila's murder, pleaded guilty to helping plan the killing in exchange for $66,000 from Heather's inheritance. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison. In October 2021, after serving 7 years, Heather was released early for good behaviour. She reunited with her daughter and said she wanted to stay in Bali and live a new life there. But now a convicted felon, she was swiftly deported back to the United States.
Good morning. Heather Mack is scheduled to land here at O'Hare around 9:30 this morning, and while her legal troubles overseas may be over, they may be just beginning here in the States. Brian Claypool has been Mack's U.S.-based attorney for the past 5 years. The Tribune is reporting Mack was ordered to return to Chicago instead of her planned destination of L.A. It is likely she will be met at O'Hare by FBI agents.
We will vigorously fight any attempt by the U.S. government to charge Heather with a crime stemming from her mother's murder.
A former federal prosecutor says it is unlikely Mack will face additional charges in the U.S.
She was convicted by a competent jurisdiction overseas, was sentenced to 10 years, served 7, but her sentence was not too dissimilar depending on the facts that might have happened here in the States.
Mack and Schaefer's 6-year-old daughter Stella is also heading back to the States. She had been living with a foster family in Indonesia. Mack's attorney says a guardian will be here for her when she lands, but it's unclear if Mack will ever get full custody of her daughter.
It would all come down to those components of whether or not it's safe for the child to live with someone who is just convicted of murder.
She had still been happy on the plane though, thinking she would land and be allowed to set up house in California with Stella. But unbeknownst to her, she had already been indicted for conspiracy to commit murder and was arrested by federal authorities upon touchdown.
Just hours after this video was taken, heiress Heather Mack was arrested when she landed at O'Hare Airport in Chicago today. The charge, conspiracy to commit murder in a foreign country and stuffing her mom's body into a suitcase during their vacation on the island Paradise. As seen in this DailyMail.com video, Heather was accompanied by her 6-year-old daughter Stella, who was born behind bars.
She will likely be behind bars for at least 6 months until we can try to have the charges thrown out. I get a phone call, hey, federal authorities have gotten involved, the FBI's involved. They're diverting Heather and her child Stella to Chicago.
Heather and her daughter were accompanied on the deportation flight by the foster mom who has been raising Stella. Do you think that Stella is the real victim here?
It is heartbreaking.
Kia Walker is the mother of Heather Mack's boyfriend, Tommy Schaefer, who's serving 18 years for the slaying in Bali.
I want custody of my granddaughter. Stella has family here. She has me.
Australian journalist Andrea Dixon spent a lot of time with Heather and even flew back to the US with her when she was deported from Bali. While she believes she is being fairly punished, she says that people have misunderstood how the murder happened. Andrea said she initiated it, but he pushed it. He'd been trying to get Heather to kill her, but she said she just couldn't do it. He was saying, go hit her, do this, do that. Whereas Tommy just went in to kill for money. He's not a complex character. He murdered for money. June 2023.
Prosecutors want Heather Mack to serve almost 30 years in prison.
In a US federal court, Heather said, I have served nearly 10 years in prison. I felt that I'd done my time, so I was gung-ho for trial. Now, after sitting here for so long, I know what I have to do. I'm going to be a felon in America, and that is fine. I understand from the US government's perspective that if I don't plead guilty and they didn't indict me, I wouldn't be a felon. I could become a police officer and work for the government. I could carry a firearm on the street. Her lawyers argued that Sheila was an abusive mother, and they were hoping for a far lesser sentence than the prosecution was seeking, which was 28 years.
9 years after police say she helped kill her mother at a resort in Indonesia, Heather Mack has pleaded guilty to charges related to her mother's death.
She went before a judge earlier this morning to avoid going to trial. CBS 2's Lauren Victory was in the courtroom and is following the case.
Heather Mack faced life in prison. 28 years is the max she'll serve, according to this plea deal. The judge now needs to decide if he accepts those terms. And if he decides Mack needs to be behind bars for more than 28 years, Mack can withdraw her plea and go to trial.
She's certainly not the same person she was. She's much more mature. She's much more empathetic. She's grown as a human just like we all would do over the course of 10 years. We're all very different people from 18 to 28.
We are hopeful for a sentence that more appropriately reflects the heinous and premeditated nature of the crime.
That was Sheila von Wiese's brother speaking. The family says they are relieved that she pled guilty.
The now 27-year-old Heather eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kill a U.S. national overseas.
Justice almost a decade in the making. Heather Mack has been sentenced to almost 26 years in prison.
In January 2024, she was sentenced to a further 26 years, a sentence that will effectively ensure she will spend most of her adult life behind bars. Heather said, "I can't take back what I did. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. I understand the love my mother had for me."
Heather Mack said tearfully the worst punishment she's had to endure is living every day with what she's done. She apologized to her family members and said if she could take away all of this, she would.
That's the first time I've ever heard Heather apologize, and I did appreciate that.
Heather Mack's family referring to the statement she made in court, tearfully apologizing to them. Mack said in part, becoming a mother herself helped her understand her own mother.
Heather claims that she cries a lot and misses Sheila and her daughter. And she is now in a very different prison setup to what she was before, free to roam around, smoke and party. She even described her old prison as more like a rehabilitation, not a jail. She is now in a much smaller room with no direct sunlight, far stricter rules, and far worse repercussions for doing things wrong, very different to her first experience. As of 2026, Tommy remains in Bali, and his 18-year sentence means with no reductions, he will be due for release around 2033. But at the same time as Heather, Tommy had also been indicted in the US, so there is that to come down the line. Stella now lives with one of Heather's cousins in Colorado. She was literally born in prison, essentially losing her parents and grandmother before she was even old enough to understand anything, and we can only hope that her life is as well adjusted as it can be and filled with love. We've seen this pattern before.
Investigators say 15-year-old Kaylee Fryer convinced her boyfriend to do it.
They had gone from being victims themselves to teenage killers.
Learned that two teens wanted in connection with a homicide have been taken into custody.
Daniel Halseth is the father of one of these teenagers.
They didn't want to think that the 15-year-old son and brother could have done this to his own family. After his denial and vehemently sticking to his story, Daniel admitted to killing his mother. Estrangement from a parent combined with a relationship that reinforces resentment, leading to violence that feels like some sort of solution. When hatred and bitterness seems to be validated by a partner who benefits from it, this can turn into action, and what begins as rebellion ends as something irreversible. Debbie said, "I just can't wrap my head around the way she died and what they did to her poor, sad, dead body. I look at a suitcase differently now. I still travel, but it's there. It's always there." What happened inside that hotel room unfolded quickly, but the consequences will last forever.